Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. We are so happy to have you here at Create with Franz to tackle all those things that might block you from creating the life that you want. And this is the question that I have for you today. Do you ever find yourself so distracted that in one day you start 10 things and you finish none of them? Did you ever have a mobile device or computer that is taking your attention away, maybe multiple times a day or an hour in a sea of meetings, text messages, emails, social media, news, and important things that you can't let go? Well, how about the spiritual people here? Do you ever find time for all this stuff? Mobile phone, text messages. But when you want to really find the time to focus, to pray, to ponder, to feel closer to the Lord, you're like, I really have no time. I have a really busy day. Do you find yourself like you're drifting and it's impossible to reclaim your focus? Then this episode is for you, a spiritual person, the person who wants to detox their life from all the junk happening. Because I am bringing to you a Professor Brian Bovee. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Franz.
And he is currently teaching at California Baptist University here in the US. And his degree and his focus are really on how technology shapes our lives and what are the strategies we can use to detox our digital life, to detox, to reclaim that attention that has been hijacked by the multiple devices and the ever present 24 hours a day tsunami of messages. So, how can we build those habits that bring back the focus and the joy and the focus on what really matters? So, these are the many questions that we can ask today to Professor Bovee. I'm just going to call you Brian because it's shorter.
That's better, yes.
And I am so glad. So, thank you so much for coming to the show, first of all.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me, Franz. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. And I want to ask you, you have this degree in tech, what was that?
It's officially called information systems. So,
Information system, which is exactly what?
well, you can kind of think of it between as a blend between computer science and business.
Okay. So this is what we have now all around us. And you're also a man of faith because you're part of a Baptist church. So you know what God is, the scriptures, the Bible, what are the commandments. You want to focus on what is good, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes this focus is not there. It must have happened to you as well that you realize, actually, I'm not as focused as I wanted. So I wanted to start from there. How did you realize that life was drifting away?
Yeah. It's been a long journey for me, and it's a good question because I can think of a lot of moments, but one in particular that really, oh, well, I'll say two in particular that really shaped me in the past and kind of helped me decide to write this book. Um, Back in 2018, I used to love to read. Used to read uh, frequently. And I just found it getting harder and harder to read and staying focused. As I would start a book, I would find my mind wandering. I want to get up and do something else. And I was losing this ability that I had to stay focused on the book and enjoy the gift of reading. And about that time, I read a book by Nicholas Carr called The Shallows. And this is before, I think most of us now have a pretty good understanding of social media and its negative effects. It's pretty out there. But this was, nobody was really talking about it at that time. And what he did is he was one of the first to kind of bring out all of the science to show that the internet at that time, even before social media and everything that we have now, just the internet was completely rewiring our brains, literally rewiring our brains. It was making it harder for us to focus. Some of those connections in our brain were being short-circuited, we can say, basically to make it harder for us to stay focused at a longer period of time because we're constantly scanning through and looking at things on a screen as opposed to sitting and doing some deep reading. So that really got me thinking about, okay, well, how does that affect my faith? And it's making it harder for me to read the word and it's making it hard for me to focus on prayer and things like that. And so I started studying it for the next several years. And And then just recently, well, fairly recently, I guess, in the last year or so, before I wrote the book, shortly before I wrote the book, my wife and I had um, volunteered to watch our grandkids for the weekend. So we had them, and if you ever done that, you know how exhausting that can be. So by the end of the weekend, I was totally tired and chasing these kids and having a blast. But um, so we sat down with some Legos, my grandson and I, and he started building something, and I pulled out my phone. And before I know it, I was lost. I was lost in scrolling, and I was doing something on my phone, and I'm hearing something in the background, and I hear my grandson say, finally, in desperation, "Grandpa, put down your phone." And he was in tears as he's trying to get me to pay attention to what he had just built, and he's trying to show me this creation that he had. And I thought, wow, it's despite everything I've learned over the last several years since then, it still has a hold on me, and I really need to write this down. I need to share my journey and just hopefully it's going to help somebody else. So I think it was those two things that really kind of got me going on this.
So this is the moment when we realize that something has to change and it has to change now.
Mhm.
But you've been an expert in all the tech, and you rely on that. You have all the meetings at university, you have to see the students, you have things happening, you have a full calendar. Wow. What happens there is that we are so used to this very busy life that we might lose track of what the real goals are. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, it's real easy when you think about this kind of a book to think, is this guy just totally against tech? And I want to make sure everybody understands that tech is my life. I love it. I embrace it. It's everything to me. They're wonderful gifts that God has given us. But it's really important for us to understand, especially coming from spiritual side, coming from our faith, to understand how our tools shape us. So one of the things I talk about in my classes, for example, that might kind of help um, explain more what you're asking is I ask my students in every class, I say, tell me, do you agree or disagree with the following statement that one of the most dangerous things you can believe is that technology is neutral? So most people will say, yeah, it's just a tool. It's just how you use it, right? It's you can use it for good or you can use it for bad. And what I like to explain is that I use the example, and I'm going to give the credit to John Dyer. He wrote a great book called From the Garden to the City. It's the one that he's used in the past. And I use the example of a shovel. If I was to go out in the yard right now and use that for its designated purpose, I could dig a hole. But that tool is going to transform me as well, because I don't use the shovel very often. My hands are going to be sore, my back's going to be sore. It's actually had an effect on me. The same is true for our tech. The same is true for our phones. Is we need to understand it's not just about avoiding pornography and avoiding all the bad things that are on the internet and minimizing our screen time. It is a lot more about understanding what does this tool do to me as a whole. And one of the things that I learned was, and we'll talk about this more, was that there's something called the attention economy that basically means that there's people out there that are dedicated to keep me on my phone and help me keep my focus there. And if that's the case, then once I learn those kinds of things, how does that impact my faith?
Hmm. That's a good question because a good question, a good observation because what we don't realize is when people write special software, create social media, they're using tech guys, okay? But they're also hiring psychologists
Mhm.
who know exactly how to grab the attention, how long will attention will last, how many interruptions can we cope with, and how to get us addicted. For example, if you read a wonderful novel, there will be a cliffhanger in
Mhm.
the end of every chapter to carry your interest, thinking, but I really want to know what happens. And that's the same for movies. When you want one movie to continue to become a series of movies or telefilms, sitcoms, you want something that continues so people have a reason to come back. And social media are designed very much on psychology principles that are very well known by the people who are in the field that are there to make us addicted, to make us feel great when we are there, and to make us reach for that when we are bored or when we're doing something that we don't think that requires too much attention. So
Mhm.
there is a clear design to keep us there. While it is good to be in touch with a family, maybe you are in the US, we are in Australia, so you will reach for these devices. And I think that's a wonderful thing. But there is a limit now because between games, entertainment, shows, you watch one episode, you want to watch the next one. What
Mhm.
are the results? What happens then when we realize that we have no time for anything? What are the consequences? Also spiritual, in your
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add just a little bit more about what you were just saying. It
Sure.
came to mind that in terms of the attention economy, in the book, I talk about the kind of the four main ways they do that. We know about the like button, we know about algorithms, but something as simple as the invention of infinite scroll that's in social media, some of the research I did showed that it has increased our time on our phones by 10 times. So it's increased it by 10, just that one piece alone. And then you, like I said, you add in algorithms and everything else, and it's pretty hard to live in the world that we live in and fight against this kind of a push to drive us to our phones. But getting back to your question, in terms of how this really impacts and plays out into our lives, and especially our spiritual lives, I really focused on a few areas, just three main areas in my book that I thought it was really affecting me. And one was solitude, so spending time alone. The second is reading, our ability to read, and I talked a little bit about that earlier. And then our prayer. So those three things, all important disciplines that it's impacted in terms of our Christian faith. So, for example, with reading, there's a popular author out there. Most people know about him. His name is Cal Newport. He's done a lot of work on this kind of topic, and what he's coined a term called solitude deprivation. And I like that term because it's the first time really in the history of the world, really within the last 50 years, that when we're alone, we're rarely ever alone, because if we have our phone, we're still getting input from the world. We're still getting pings and things like that on our phone where we can't really hear from God. So for many of us, we suffer from this idea of solitude deprivation because of our devices and the ability to silence our minds. And um, there's a really interesting study, I think, just on this one topic that I would like to share, um, just to show how much we don't like being alone. They took a group of people and they gave them mild well, they exposed them to different sights and sounds in this room, and then they said, "We'd like to pay you to give you a mild electric shock." And so, after they did that, they said, "Okay, now we're going to leave you in the room for 15 minutes with this device that gave them the shock." And the vast majority said they didn't want to be paid, anymore to be shocked again. But when they left them in this room for 15 minutes, the results were pretty amazing. That one third of the men and one quarter of the women shocked themselves instead of embracing that time alone. And one guy shocked himself 119 times. So, so I think I share that story and that study. It's just amazing to me to think that how far we'll go just from that one discipline, Christian discipline, to spend time alone with our thoughts.
Wow. So remaining alone is such a daunting experience. What kind of voices are we hearing? That could be quite a thing. So let's say that I've already decided that I want to detox my life from this constant deluge of messages and interesting videos. So, is there any strategy that actually works, that is evidence based, that people can say, right, I can start doing something today? What can you do? And did you use this strategy?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question, and yes, I did. So for me, knowing the effects of social media and everything, I really limited its use. We still have it in our family. I still have an account that I'll pull up once in a while, but I know personally for me, the thing that's been a draw for me, it's always pulled me to my phone is the news. So Recently, I went through a detox, and so this is the other area that I talk about in the book is how we move forward to kind of reconnect with God and get away from my device. And if you look at the research that's on digital detoxes and fasting from your devices, it doesn't really, there isn't a lot out there. The research actually shows that there's no, long-term studies or conclusions. And if you've ever done one, my experience, the first one I did before this last time, or before I wrote the book even, it was extremely frustrating because I decided I'm going to step away from my phone for maybe a weekend. And then there's this void of time that I'm left with, and I don't know what to do with. And I'm bored out of my mind. And I just feel like this is not, you know, going to be a positive experience for me overall. And, and so what I learned is that in essence, when we take on a digital detox, we need to do two things. We need to embrace offense and defense. So on the defensive side, that's obviously getting the tech away from us, limiting the tech that's coming in. So we're going to fast from our device, whether it be for 24 hours or maybe even a month. And and then on the offensive side, I talk a lot in the book about um, developing our focus. So that's something that you don't hear a lot about. And so in my book, I talk about a theory called flow theory, and it basically involves any time where you feel like you're been totally in the zone. And so for me, if I'm writing a book, or for me, I love fishing, or sometimes when I'm running, time seems to fly by and I'm just doing the task. And I feel like ideally, you want to find tasks that align with God's purpose for your life, that you're doing something to give back to Him. And like, again, like writing a book or something like that. And I don't have any desire to look at my phone. So what I talk about in the book is not only minimizing distractions, but finding those things in your life that bring you back to the things that you love, those things that God's put in your heart to connect with other people and connect with God. And um, bringing those in to replace that time where you've got this that you used to dedicate to your phone. And my experience is that when you do that, when you take away all the time that we waste on our phone and we reconnect with these things that we're passionate about, at the end of it, it doesn't have the draw. And we can do things like adding friction, and I talk about this in my book too, as far as adding friction and making it a little harder for us to go back and fall into those old habits, things like maybe delete the app off your phone, but give yourself permission to look at it on your computer for an hour a day. Look at Instagram that way. So it's not going to pull you in. So again, I think that's in a nutshell, really what where we want to where I would suggest people go when they want to reclaim their focus is not only just stepping away from their phones, but what are you gonna run to? And I want to say one more thing in terms of a detox, because a lot of times the idea of leaving our phone for a weekend or longer or something like that just seems overwhelming. How can I do that? I use my phone for everything. And so what I want to encourage people to think about is the difference between utility and distraction. So when we pick up our phone, there's most of the time we're picking it up to be distracted, to look at something that we're amused by, that we want to zone out and just see what's there. And then the other thing, like for me as an online instructor, I do a lot with my phone in terms of checking student emails and things like that. That's more on the utility side. So I think if we're honest, if we make a list of the things that are in the distraction column, those apps that are always taking us away from our family and our relationship with God, and they're just purely distraction, we could leave those behind for a lot longer period of time. We could engage in a digital fast, where it might even last a month. That might be a good goal, to take those off of your phone for a month and commit to just using your phone for utility.
I love this. So, utility versus entertainment.
Yeah, good.
Yes, so the phone should be a tool. Like when we used to have a so-called Nokia brick telephone, it's so
Mhm.
hard. It falls on the floor. It just never breaks. We used to like three in the house. And it was so hard to text. You have three letters for every button. So you have to hold there. It was such a pain. You would never be texting for very long because it's such a pain to do it. And of course, there was nothing, it was a tiny screen, nothing really interesting to look at. And it would just text, "Are you there? I'll meet you at 4 o'clock. Oh,
Mm,
sorry, can you pick me up? I got stuck in here." That's fine. But now the phone has become an entertainment center.
mm,
And because it's lights, it's no longer a computer. If you think about it, in the 60s, because I'm a 65 girl, so in the encyclopedias, you will see the photos of a computer and occupied the entire room with lots
mm,
of moving devices. It was a massive thing. And then
mm,
in the 80s, we were working with IBM and Olivetti, and it was so hard to use DOS and all
mhm.
these codes just to do in one line. And
Yep.
then Mac came out, Apple, and I bought my very first Mac, the G3. It was 1998. It
Mhm.
was state of the art thing. It had 3 gigabytes. It was just crazy, 3 gigabytes. I mean, that was like incredible. Now I can put all my projects because I was an artist, still am.
I
And I
think I
was
had that
putting all
same
my
machine.
images. I did all the courses, Photoshop. But only like 2008-ish, when my daughter was born, Facebook came out.
Mhm.
And then suddenly people started to use the telephone for a lot more than just an old video game or whatever. It was crazy. And then I started to realize about 10 years ago, everyone is just constantly looking down so much. The chiropractors and physiotherapists are commenting that before it used to be the old people they come there with a hunchback and all the neck is painful, but now 20-year-olds end up having physiotherapy because they're constantly looking
Mhm.
down like that. Nobody thinks about doing that,
Mhm.
it has
Exactly.
to be done, and they're always scrolling.
Mhm.
And I can't remember who it was last week. Oh, I don't remember. There was quite a famous person. She was in a famous YouTube video. And she said she was going to some musical production, and in the bus there was a girl and a boy, both mid 20s, very attractive, professional looking, and they could have been a great match just for style, but they never looked at one another because they're constantly scrolling. And one of
Mhm.
them, she picked, he was looking at the dating site. Now, in a dating
Mhm.
site, you will look all these filters photos where you can't really tell who's who and who's real, but the real girl was right there. He never saw the girl. They literally
Oh,
left the bus. They've never met. And I
wow.
thought that is a little bit the epitome of our lives now. We are so busy
Mm,
looking down that if
mhm,
we just looked up for a minute and saw what's actually happening, we
mhm.
might have a better life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It reminds me, I think in the very start of the book, I give uh, I tell a story that I think kind of illustrates the way we are today. And it's because I've traveled a lot, and I think most of us can relate to this if you've traveled, um, of traveling in an airplane to a distant country that you're not familiar with. You get to this country, you go out and you realize that, go out to the car and you realize, oh no, my charger's dead and my phone is now dead. So I have to get to the hotel. How do I do this? And you make the unwise decision to just start driving and going from place to place and trying to find your way to a hotel in this country that you've never been to. And the reason why I tell that story is, to me, it's the story of how so many of us are living our lives today. I think God's given us a purpose, and we can have an abundant, He promises us an abundant life. It's not an easy life, but an abundant life. And it's not going to be found in our phones. So He's given us a purpose and a focus. But for so many of us, we're just so distracted, like that guy. We just go from one thing to the next, and we never make it there because we haven't stopped to think long enough. God, what are you calling me to do? And what do I need to lay aside? Like it says in Hebrews.
Yes. What is a good thing to do is to start today. Some people that I know personally, they have taken off all the social media from their mobile devices. Just taken off. So they're not distracted all the time. And if they want to communicate, they have messenger or text messages. And they realize now they have so much more time.
Mhm.
Isn't that
Yeah,
crazy?
for some people that might seem too hard, too difficult, too drastic. And I think that's okay. Again, social media is a wonderful thing for me to be able to remain connected with my family, see my grandkids, and all those kinds of things. So there's a way that you can, again, like I said before, add friction to make it more difficult for you to fall into the habits that you want to avoid. And I've heard people say things like even when they're at home, they keep their phone plugged in the bedroom, so they're not instantly going to it all the time. Or even
Hmm.
like I said before, delete the app off your phone, but then give yourself permission to look at it on your computer. Because if you're at your computer, let's say an hour a day, depending on what you do or whatever, then maybe that's not as much of a draw, so you can still remain connected. It's not going to dictate your life in ways you don't want it to. So I think there, and even the research shows even things like putting your phone into grayscale mode, black and white, will cause you to look at it a lot less. So there's a lot of ways that you can think about in terms of adding friction to make it more difficult for you to fall into those old habits.
Yeah, that is wonderful. So you think we can be still in control. And you even wrote a book. What was the title of your book again?
The focused faith. Yeah. The focused
Uh-huh.
faith.
Focused Faith.
Yeah.
And this book will give us more energy, focus, and strategy if we have failed to get a life again, because that's important. And I think, once you get gardening or go to your craft club, go to your band to play music, go
Mhm.
outside and do service, there is so much more than social media. Although the social media could be the way of creating those groups of interest where you can do service, do work, create a hobby, develop, or help somebody else, because
Mhm.
it's not just about us. So there are lots of ways to use the mobile devices and desktop computers in a positive way. They will enhance our life, will help people on the other side of the world. And there are other ways that give us like very short dopamine injection
Mhm.
feeling that's
Mhm.
very good, but then we leave us kind of tired. I found out if I have, maybe if I'm stuck somewhere, I can't go and I'm like, literally, there's nothing to do aside from my phone. After
Mhm.
half an hour, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just so bored to death for using the phone.
Mhm.
I'd rather talk to people. I can talk to
Mhm.
a stone, so that's easy for me. But it's so important nowadays, and I'm sure as a final word, what is the effect of social media, constant AI, fake images on us as a society and on your students? What do you see in your students? Just before we go.
Well, I think the main effect is that it's preventing us from, like I said, alluded to just a second ago, from um, attaining the abundant life that God has planned for us. I really believe that God has an abundant life. And again, that's not necessarily an easy life, but something that is going to be a lot more than the joy that we find on our phone. And I think if, as we would become aware of not only the things like the attention economy, but how we can reclaim our focus and go towards the things that God's called us to, we won't ever go back. We'll want and to run to what He's given us. And I think that, and to answer your question, I think that's really where it's at, is just the loss of focus and the loss of what could have been an abundant life.
Yes, certainly focus is a big thing nowadays, and it's important to realize while technology, social media, AI can help us to enhance our lives, they're not a god. They do not
Mhm.
have the answer to all the questions. Sometimes to listen to our inner self, to connect with nature, to connect with God, we really need to shut down everything and
Mhm.
just allow this communication to go
Mhm.
through. But it has to be quiet because I remember a lot of people from many faiths telling me it's only when I'm very still that I can feel or maybe hear this inspiration that
Yeah.
we believe it comes from God. Other people might think it comes from the universe, whatever. But to be still, you have to turn off these devices. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's a
Yeah, I,
big
I love the saying. It says, I think it was Mother Teresa that said it. It said, she said, "In the silence of the heart, God speaks."
right.
And for so
Silent.
many of us, we don't get that. We very rarely have the silence of the heart.
Yeah. So let's turn off the noise and we want to instead turn up the focus. So,
Mhm.
Brian Bovee, thank you so much for coming to the show. That was amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Franz. This was an awesome discussion. I appreciate it.
I hope you guys listening to this episode will go to all the links that will be put in the description, and you will be able to maybe check out a book, maybe give it to somebody, maybe read it yourself with your family and take some time off to find out again who you are, what is your purpose, and where are you going next. Thank you so much. I hope you will like this episode and maybe subscribe, leave a good review so the show can be visible to more people so we can help you to create the life that you deserve. Thank you so much. See you all next week. Bye bye.